here's my word. Get the hell off my spread. Now.
For decades, a Newport Beach mansion held John Wayne's darkest secrets. When he died in 1979, his house was immediately sealed, every photo, letter, and personal item locked away for over 30 years. In 2011, they finally opened the doors, and what they discovered inside left everyone stunned. From record-breaking movie props to a shocking will that tore his family apart, this is the story of what really happened to the Duke's fortune. John Wayne was born Marion Robert Morrison on May 26, 1907, in Winterset, Iowa. When he was born, he weighed 13 pounds, which was so unusual that the local newspaper mentioned it. From the very start, he seemed destined to be larger than life. At just 3 years old, he almost died when he fell into an icy creek. A stranger passing by saved him, and that moment showed the kind of resilience he would carry with him his whole life. His name changed early on. When his parents had another son, they decided to name the baby Robert, so Marion's middle name was switched to Mitchell. This change might seem small, but it hinted at the bigger transformations that would come later. In 1914, the family moved to Glendale, California, because his father's business failed. In Glendale, Marion earned the nickname Duke because of his Airedale Terrier, also named Duke. The two were always together, and local firefighters started calling them Big Duke and Little Duke. Marion liked it, and the nickname stuck. Growing up, Marion loved football. In 1925, he got a football scholarship to the University of Southern California. He studied pre-law and was a Sigma Chi fraternity member. But his football dreams ended when he injured his shoulder in a body surfing accident. Losing the scholarship was devastating. He thought his plans were ruined, but this accident actually pushed him toward the path that made him famous. After his football career ended, Marion found a job at Fox Studios in 1927. He worked as a prop man, earning $35 a week. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave him a foot in the door. His first time on screen wasn't as an actor, but as an uncredited...
John Wayne spent a lifetime building the image of an American legend. On screen, he was fearless, confident, and almost impossible to defeat. Whether he was riding across the frontier or standing his ground in a war film, audiences believed they knew exactly who he was. But when the man behind the legend died in June 1979, another story quietly began behind the closed doors of his waterfront home in Newport Beach, California. Family members, attorneys, and trusted associates entered the estate to catalog everything he had left behind. The public wasn't invited. For decades, much of what remained inside stayed out of sight, fueling rumors that the Duke had taken many of his secrets with him. Then, years later, hundreds of items from his private collection finally emerged, offering an unusually intimate look at one of Hollywood's biggest icons. The discoveries weren't supernatural or scandalous. They were something far more fascinating, a portrait of the real man hidden behind one of cinema's greatest legends. By the time of his death, John Wayne had become more than a movie star. He represented a particular vision of America that millions admired. His distinctive walk, unmistakable voice, and commanding screen presence had appeared in well over 100 films spanning nearly 5 decades. Yet the public persona often overshadowed the private individual. Friends described him as loyal, generous, stubborn, and deeply sentimental. Those closest to him knew there was another side to the man the world simply called the Duke. Born Marion Robert Morrison on May 26, 1907, in Winterset, Iowa, Wayne's beginnings were remarkably ordinary. His father struggled financially, forcing the family to relocate to Southern California while John was still a child. Growing up in Glendale, he wasn't dreaming about Hollywood fame. Instead, he loved sports, especially football, and imagined a future far removed from movie sets. His nickname, Duke, actually came from his beloved Airedale Terrier. The local firefighters knew the inseparable pair as Little Duke and Big Duke, eventually dropping the little altogether. It was a nickname that would stay with him for the rest of his life. His athletic ability earned him a football scholarship to the University of Southern California, where he studied pre-law. Everything seemed to point toward a successful career outside entertainment, until a body surfing accident severely injured his shoulder. The injury ended his football ambitions and cost him his scholarship. It was a devastating setback, but it also redirected his future in a way no one could have predicted. Needing work, Wayne found employment at Fox Studios, first moving props and assisting behind the scenes. It wasn't glamorous. He earned modest wages while learning how movies were made from the ground up. His towering height and rugged appearance occasionally landed him small, uncredited roles in films. More importantly, his time around the studio introduced him to director John Ford, who would become the single most influential figure in Wayne's acting career. Ford recognized something unique in the young man. Wayne wasn't yet a polished actor, but he possessed an authentic presence that cameras naturally captured. Ford began giving him small opportunities, slowly preparing him for something much bigger. Still, success did not arrive overnight. Throughout the 1930s, Wayne worked relentlessly in low-budget westerns that were often produced on tight schedules and even tighter budgets. Many were considered B-movies, shown as supporting features rather than major attractions. He appeared in dozens of these productions, sometimes filming an entire picture within only a few days. Although the work paid the bills, critics paid little attention, and major studios still viewed him as just another cowboy actor. There were moments when he seriously questioned whether he had chosen the wrong profession. After nearly a decade without becoming a major star, he considered walking away from Hollywood altogether. It would have been an understandable decision. Few actors endure years of disappointment before finding the role that changes everything. That role arrived in 1939 with Stagecoach. Director John Ford insisted on casting Wayne despite objections from studio executives, who preferred a more established leading man. Ford believed Wayne possessed exactly the qualities the character required, even if the rest of Hollywood couldn't yet see it. The gamble paid off spectacularly. When audiences first saw Wayne as a Ringo Kid, his introduction instantly became one of the most memorable entrances in film history. A dramatic camera shot revealed the young outlaw standing alone with his rifle before the stagecoach approached. It lasted only seconds, but it transformed Wayne from a struggling actor into a genuine star almost overnight. Stagecoach also elevated the Western genre itself. Instead of being viewed merely as inexpensive entertainment, Westerns suddenly demonstrated they could tell emotionally rich stories with memorable characters. Wayne became inseparable from that transformation. Success brought opportunities, but it also brought expectations. Producers increasingly wanted Wayne to portray strong, principled heroes. Although he occasionally considered branching into different roles, he often chose projects that reinforced the image audiences loved. Over time, his screen persona became one of Hollywood's most recognizable brands. The partnership between John Wayne and John Ford flourished for decades. Together, they created classics including Fort Apache, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, Rio Grande, The Quiet Man, The Searchers, and many others. Their relationship, however, wasn't always comfortable. Ford demanded perfection and frequently challenged Wayne in front of entire film crews. Friends recalled that Ford could be intimidating, sometimes criticizing Wayne harshly during filming. Yet Wayne accepted the treatment because he believed Ford consistently pushed him to become a better actor. Perhaps no collaboration demonstrated that better than The Searchers in 1956. Although the film received little awards recognition upon release, modern critics frequently rank it among the greatest American movies ever made. Wayne's portrayal of Ethan Edwards revealed emotional complexity rarely seen in his earlier work. The performance showcased anger, loneliness, obsession, and vulnerability beneath the familiar, tough exterior. Ironically, one of Wayne's finest performances initially passed almost unnoticed by award voters. His long-awaited Academy Award recognition would come years later through a very different role. In 1969, Wayne starred in True Grit, portraying the gruff, one-eyed U.S. Marshal Rooster Cogburn. By then, he was already battling significant health issues. Years earlier, doctors had removed one of his lungs during treatment for lung cancer. Filming demanding outdoor scenes became increasingly difficult, especially at higher elevations. Despite these challenges, Wayne delivered one of the most beloved performances of his career. When he finally won the Academy Award for Best Actor, he famously joked that if he'd known wearing an eye patch would earn him an Oscar, he would have put one on decades earlier. The audience laughed, but behind the humor was a lifetime of perseverance. Many in Hollywood viewed the award not only as recognition for true grit, but also as acknowledgement of everything Wayne had contributed to American cinema, away from the cameras. However, life was considerably more complicated. Wayne married 3 times and became the father of 7 children. His demanding filming schedule often kept him away from home for months at a time. Those long absences strained relationships, and each marriage faced its own challenges. While the public admired the confident hero on screen, his private life reflected many of the same struggles experienced by countless families balancing career, fame, and personal responsibilities. His 3rd wife, Pilar Palit, remained legally married to him until his death, although the couple had separated years earlier. That separation would later become an important detail when his estate was settled, surprising many observers who assumed she would inherit a substantial portion of his fortune. But before questions about money, inheritance, and treasured possessions ever surfaced, Wayne faced a far more personal battle: cancer. In 1964, doctors diagnosed him with lung cancer. The news stunned both Hollywood and his fans. Wayne had been a heavy smoker for decades, and the disease required major surgery to remove his left lung along with several ribs. Many expected him to retire quietly. Instead, Wayne returned to work. Even more remarkably, he spoke publicly about his illness during an era when many celebrities kept serious medical conditions secret. He encouraged Americans to undergo regular medical examinations and supported efforts to improve cancer research. His openness helped reduce some of the stigma surrounding the disease at a time when public discussion remained relatively uncommon. For several years, he appeared to recover successfully. Unfortunately, the victory proved temporary. In the late 1970s, Wayne was diagnosed with stomach cancer. Although he continued working and spending time with family whenever possible, his health steadily declined. His final film, The Shouldest, carried extraordinary emotional weight because it told the story of an aging gunfighter facing terminal illness. Many viewers later realized the role closely mirrored Wayne's own circumstances. When filming concluded, he reportedly understood it would likely be his farewell to a profession that had defined his life. On June 11, 1979, John Wayne died at UCLA Medical Center at the age of 72. The reaction was immediate. Tributes poured in from fellow actors, political leaders, military veterans, and ordinary fans across the country. Flowers surrounded his Hollywood Walk of Fame star. Newspapers around the world devoted front pages to his passing. President Jimmy Carter praised him as a uniquely American figure whose influence extended far beyond entertainment. Yet while the public mourned, another process quietly unfolded behind closed doors. Lawyers arrived. Family members gathered. Personal belongings were carefully documented. The doors of John Wayne's Newport Beach home closed to the outside world, protecting everything he had accumulated during one of Hollywood's most remarkable careers. Inside were movie costumes, handwritten letters, awards, scripts covered with notes, family photographs, books, artwork, furniture, firearms, and countless personal keepsakes collected over decades. Most people assumed those treasures would remain hidden forever. They had no idea that more than 30 years later, the contents of that remarkable estate would finally emerge, revealing unexpected details about the private life of the man the world thought it already knew. When John Wayne's home was finally emptied and many of its contents were placed into secure storage after his death, few people outside his family knew exactly what had been preserved. For decades, the collection remained largely untouched. Fans imagined secret diaries, hidden fortunes, or long-lost Hollywood scandals waiting to be uncovered. The truth was different, but in many ways, even more compelling, rather than exposing a shocking double life. The collection revealed a remarkable story of a man who carefully preserved the milestones of an extraordinary career. By 2011, more than 30 years had passed since Wayne's death. His family decided it was finally time to allow collectors and fans to own pieces of Hollywood history. An auction featuring more than 700 authentic items from his personal collection attracted enormous attention. Collectors from across the United States traveled to Los Angeles, while thousands more followed the event from around the world. What made the auction special wasn't simply the value of the items. It was the fact that many have remained unseen since 1979. Walking through the exhibition before the sale was almost like stepping into a private museum dedicated to one of cinema's greatest stars. There were movie costumes carefully preserved from famous films, handwritten correspondence, personal photographs, awards, firearms, furniture, scripts filled with production notes, paintings, books, hats, boots, and dozens of everyday possessions that John Wayne had once used without ever imagining they would someday become treasured collectibles. One of the first surprises was how organized Wayne had been. His working scripts demonstrated an actor who took preparation seriously. Pages contained notes, folded corners, underlined dialogue, and carefully marked scenes. Contrary to the popular belief that Wayne simply relied on charisma, the document showed someone who studied his roles carefully and paid close attention to every production. Collectors were especially fascinated by costumes that had become inseparable from Wayne's screen image. His military uniform pieces from the Green Berets generated intense bidding. So did cowboy hats worn in several westerns that had helped define his legendary image. To movie fans, these weren't simply articles of clothing. They represented decades of cinematic history. Even seemingly ordinary possessions commanded astonishing prices. His driver's license became one of the auction's most talked about items. It wasn't valuable because of what it was, but because it represented something intensely personal. Every fan had seen John Wayne on movie screens, but very few had ever imagined owning something he carried in his pocket during everyday life. The same pattern repeated throughout the sale. Simple clothing, reading glasses, personal books, decorative items from his home, objects that would have seemed insignificant in almost any other household suddenly became prized historical artifacts because they offered a glimpse into the private world of an icon. The bookshelves attracted particular interest. Wayne's library reflected interests that stretched far beyond Western films. History, military campaigns, biographies of political leaders, American history, naval strategy, and classic literature filled the shelves. Visitors discovered that his curiosity extended well beyond the characters he portrayed on screen. There were also family photographs that rarely appeared in magazines during his lifetime. Instead of publicity shots, these images showed birthday celebrations, vacations, fishing trips, and quiet moments spent with children and grandchildren. The photographs reminded viewers that behind Hollywood's larger-than-life cowboys stood a father whose happiest memories often had nothing to do with movie cameras. Among the artwork was an especially meaningful portrait painted by artist John Decker, one of Wayne's close friends. The painting had hung inside his home for years, suggesting that Wayne considered it something deeply personal rather than merely decorative. Like many pieces in the collection, it represented relationships formed away from movie sets. The auction also revealed Wayne's passion for life on the water. Although many fans associate him with horses and dusty western landscapes, boating had become one of his greatest hobbies during his later years. His famous yacht, Wild Goose, served as a floating retreat where family and friends gathered far from Hollywood. Originally built as a U.S. Navy minesweeper during World War II, the vessel was transformed into a luxurious private yacht that Wayne treasured for years. Many Hollywood legends, political figures, athletes, and close friends spent time aboard Wild Goose. To Wayne, it offered something increasingly difficult to find: privacy. His Newport Beach residence reflected the same desire. Unlike the extravagant mansions owned by many celebrities, Wayne's waterfront home emphasized comfort over unnecessary luxury. The property overlooked beautiful coastal scenery and became the place where he spent much of his final years surrounded by family and close friends. Yet, while fans admired the collection, another subject continued attracting public attention: his will. When details of Wayne's estate became public after his death, many observers were surprised by how his assets had been distributed. Although he remained legally married to Pilar Pallitt until his death, the couple had been separated for several years. His estate plan primarily benefited his children and included various trusts and provisions established before his passing. Like many large estates, the administration proved legally complex. As years passed, disagreements emerged among some family members concerning business interests associated with John Wayne's name and licensing rights. These disputes occasionally reached courtrooms and generated media coverage, reminding the public that even famous families often experience difficult disagreements after the loss of a loved one. Despite those legal battles, the overall financial picture surprised many people. At the time of his death in 1979, John Wayne's probate estate was valued at several $1 million, a considerable fortune by ordinary standards, but smaller than many expected for one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Some assumed he should have left behind an empire comparable to modern entertainment billionaires. The explanation was relatively straightforward. Wayne lived during a very different era of Hollywood. Actors generally earned far less than today's highest-paid celebrities. Much of his wealth was tied to real estate investments and business partnerships rather than massive salaries alone. He was also known for supporting family members, maintaining expensive properties, and investing heavily in projects he believed in, even when those projects carried significant financial risks. Perhaps the greatest example was the Alamo. Wayne invested enormous personal resources into producing and directing the film because he believed passionately in telling the story his way. Although the production became one of the largest filmmaking efforts of its time, its financial performance never fully matched its extraordinary cost. It was a reminder that Wayne often valued legacy over profit. Following his death, that legacy continued evolving in unexpected ways. In 1985, his family established the John Wayne Cancer Foundation, honoring his public commitment to cancer awareness. Over the decades, the organization has helped support education, early detection programs, and cancer research. For many supporters, this work became one of the most meaningful parts of Wayne's lasting influence. Yet history rarely remembers public figures in simple terms. Long after his passing, John Wayne also became the subject of renewed debate over controversial comments he made during interviews in the early 1970s. Critics argued that some of his statements about race reflected attitudes that were harmful and offensive. Supporters countered that his entire life and career should be considered rather than judging him solely through those remarks. The discussion intensified decades later as communities across America reconsidered monuments, public memorials, and the legacies of historical figures. Questions arose about places named after Wayne, including Orange County's John Wayne Airport. Others focused on exhibitions honoring his career. The debates demonstrated how complicated historical reputations can become. For some Americans, John Wayne remained the ultimate Western hero. For others, his controversial statements complicated that image. Both perspectives became part of the historical conversation surrounding his legacy. Perhaps the most revealing lesson from everything found inside his estate was that no collection of possessions could fully explain a human life. The hats represented famous performances. The scripts reflected years of hard work. The photographs captured private happiness. The letters preserved lifelong friendships. The awards celebrated professional achievement. But together, they told a larger story, that John Wayne was never simply the fearless cowboy audiences saw on movie screens. He was a son whose family struggled financially during his childhood, a college athlete whose dreams changed after injury, a young actor who nearly abandoned Hollywood before finally succeeding, a husband whose marriages experienced both love and heartbreak, a father who tried to balance fame with family responsibilities, a man who faced life-threatening illness with remarkable determination, and ultimately, a cultural icon whose influence continues to inspire admiration, debate, and historical examination decades after his death. In many ways, the greatest discovery inside John Wayne's estate wasn't a hidden treasure or a shocking secret. It was a realization that behind one of Hollywood's most recognizable legends stood an ordinary human being who experienced triumph